Hi there, how are you? Dennis here and Bernadette here for the March edition of the Simic Report. And geez, I tell you what, very different March than it is to February. Ironically, we were standing on the Bulimba River Walk talking about what was happening in February. Here we are in March. Now we're currently located here at Hardcastle Park here in Hawthorn, where the Hawthorn City Cat is over my shoulder, as you can see. But obviously the events that transpired at the back end of February with the floods again, and you can clearly see where we're standing here was impacted through these round of floods. You can see over my shoulder the clean-up operations are still taking place as they clean up the river, and here at Hardcastle Park, where the water did rise in 2022 as it did in 2011. Now that's something to quickly touch on. What we saw here in the Inner East was likened to what we saw in 2011 as well, and how that impacted the Inner East. The similar streets, the similar pockets that did get impacted again, very similar to 2011, but it also likened to 2011. It was more the western corridor, the inner south, as opposed to the Inner East. We fared quite well compared to those other suburbs, and our heartfelt messages go out to those that were impacted during these events. It's so sad to see, but you know, there's a lot of questions that have been raised as a result of these floods as well, and what has actually transpired in the last couple of weeks since those events took place. And what I'll do is I'm going to dive straight into property management, but I'll get you to talk about what your team did through that period of time, and then I'll talk about what's happened within the sales world and what impact, if any, it's going to have. So Bernadette, what's been happening?
So it has obviously been quite interesting for us all, but what we did as a business, we've made that decision to personally contact all our tenants and landlords. The reason for why we contacted all our tenants is, one, to make sure, one, that they were safe and that they were okay. It was really important for us to, you know, their safety, and making sure that that they were okay through these floods, because there were a lot of people that obviously weren't. The other thing is making sure that our landlords' properties were okay, and that there were no to be able to report back as well, just to advise them if there are any damages, or if they had been affected by these floods as well. So all our landlords and tenants did also receive a SMS and an email from us, just obviously advising them that they will be communicating with them.
I think when I go back, I remember it was nearly 2,000 tenants and landlords calls that were made within a 24-hour period. I think most people underestimate how long that actually takes and the effort that it's taken. And we did that willingly. The entire team put their hand up, no questions asked, we're going to do this. We did make the decision. We did fire off a text message first and an email to every tenant, every landlord, for a quick, immediate response, because just the effort to make 2,000 phone calls takes time.
It does, definitely.
So to generate that quick SMS to let us know quickly, if you can, if you have access to a mobile device or your emails, to let us know straight away. But we will be calling you firsthand, and to call every tenant, to be able to then give first-hand feedback to owners who are wondering what's happening, particularly if they're interstate.
It made it easier by us contacting the tenants, because if a tenant was obviously in distress or wasn't able to contact us, we were able to contact them, and this gave us the ability to action what we needed to do with managing these properties as well. And
fortunately for us within our business, there were some properties that were impacted, but on the scheme of the properties that we do manage, it was very few.
Correct,
and we're going through the process now. We're making sure that everything's being rectified and corrected. Obviously, the minimal things with maintenance and leaking roofs and things like that, but inundation, it was only a handful of properties that were impacted. As I mentioned earlier, the western corridor and probably the inner south, and even on the north side, I know, was impacted. So the Inner East, as it was in 2011, very, very similar. But I also know that it hasn't impacted the ability to rent properties through this period as well.
No, it hasn't. So one thing we have found, that there are still a lot of tenants looking in the actual market. We are still receiving multiple applications on properties. Days on market are still quite low, and tenants are renewing their leases. So this has not hindered the leasing side of property management.
So pretty much as we were in February, it continues through March, even though we all went through the terrible events of the floods. Now, what does that mean for sales? And one of the questions that I'm hearing in the last few days since the 2022 flooding event is this going to have an impact on property prices, the saleability of a home? As I mentioned earlier, it didn't affect the Inner East as much as the other corridors. Yes, we were impacted, but because we've been in the marketplace for 18 years, Now, we owned a number of real estate businesses within a franchise during the 2011 floods, and it's effectively the same thing, set and repeat. What I was seeing back then, as the business owners back then, as what we're seeing today, and the questions that were coming from buyers. It didn't impact the property values in 2011. We don't expect it to impact the property values in 2022. The evidence of that is the open homes continued through directly after, and even that Saturday, that particular weekend that the flooding events and all that rain came down, I had a number of open homes, and there was still a large number of buyers coming through those inspections, and even had an auction the weekend after, being McCrossan Avenue at Norman Park, selling for $175,000 above reserve on a main road. So the heat in the market's still there. But what we are expecting to see is other factors that are going to be impacting the market. The only thing that we believe that the 2022 floods are going to do is that, I suppose, the stigma or the unknown or the questions from buyers that are probably not locally based, and that is a period after the 2011 floods will be the same thing as a period after the 22 floods, is buyers asking, did it flood?
Correct.
Was it impacted? And it's generally the buyers that are non-local. And over a period of time, that will start to dissipate, and we start to hear that question less and less. But I can say, even in the early piece here, we're actually already seeing less buyers asking that question now after the 2022 one. So that's probably an interesting piece. But the outside factors I mentioned earlier is the interest rates. I mentioned it in February. We've already now seen first-hand data coming through from the Sydney market as they finished up February. For the first time in 17 months, they've had a negative growth. So the market declined in Sydney for the first time in 17 months. So as expected, we've mentioned in a previous video, Sydney and Melbourne will probably be the first to soften, and then there will be a staggered approach to Brisbane. Eventually our market will steady off. Now, that is not a decline in prices in Brisbane. We just think the heat in the market will just level off. But don't confuse that with prices are still not being achieved. We're still achieving fantastic results. As I just mentioned, the property at McCrossan Avenue selling for $175,000 above reserve on a main road. So the buyers are there, the volumes are still there. We're just seeing the pressure and the heat in the market just coming off just slightly. We expect that to be the case throughout, at least till June, when they're starting to flag interest rates. But we'll see, and we'll keep you posted. Now, if you have any questions at all with regards to property management or sales, feel free to give us a call in the office on 3638 4700. Otherwise, we look forward to coming back to you in the April edition of the Simic Report. We'll see you then.